At 30,000 feet, the cabin lights glowed like a quiet constellation. Crystal rims touched metal trays, lids clicked shut, and the hush of pressurized air folded around first class like a velvet curtain. Then a flat voice cut through the stillness as cleanly as a blade. "Tell me," the flight attendant said, "what business could three little girls like you possibly have in these seats?" Her badge read, Linda Carver. The teal Meridian Air uniform fit her like a rule. Blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, posture rehearsed by a decade of serving champagne to the already arrived. She stood rigid in the aisle of row 2, looming over three children dressed so neatly they looked like they had stepped out of a photograph. The Reed triplets, Aria, Belle, and Noah, 12-year-old fully African black sisters wearing identical navy blue blazers and crisp white shirts. Their straight, silky black hair shone under the cabin lights, falling evenly over their shoulders. Aria occupied the middle seat with a stillness that felt older than she was. Belle kept her chin lifted in a careful angle that said she would not bend even when she had to bow. Noah's hands were folded so tightly in her lap that the knuckles paled against her deep brown skin. Passengers nearby glanced up and then away, as if politeness were a blindfold. A man paused his laptop. The grandmother by the window tucked her knitting into the crook of her elbow. Someone whispered. Someone else pretended not to listen. "Boarding passes," Linda demanded, palm out. Again. Aria opened a small leather sleeve and placed the 3 slips into the waiting hand. Linda held them to the downlights like she was checking for counterfeit currency. "First class," she announced to no one and everyone. "Full fare." Her eyebrows lifted to the height of disbelief. "Ambitious." Belle met her gaze with the steadiness of a lit match. "Ambition is permitted at altitude, isn't it?" A soft ripple of laughter moved through the row, the kind that apologizes as it arrives. Linda did not laugh. Her mouth stiffened. "This cabin is for professionals," she said, louder now. "It is not for play." She let the words hang there, heavy as luggage. Noah exhaled through her nose, the smallest sound in the world, and the cabin seemed to hear it. Aria's eyes never left Linda's face. Not a challenge, not a plea, just a mirror. What everyone could feel, though no one named it yet, was that Linda had not asked a question about tickets. She had asked a question about belonging. The city below wore its lights like bracelets. In a glass conference room 40 floors up, Meridian Air's heart monitor, an animated chart of lines and dips and lurches, blinked across a wall. Marcus Reed, CEO, stood with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled high, the posture of a man in a knife fight with numbers. The airline was under attack, a hostile consortium buying rumors, selling doubt, and trying to pry loose anything not nailed down with conviction. His phone buzzed on silent. A message from Dr. Sana Reed, chief of pediatric neurology, and his partner in building both a family and a life tough enough to weather public storms. "Girls are wheels up. School project ran late, so I booked them under my maiden name for privacy. Surprise them at the morning briefing?" Marcus allowed himself a smile that only touched one corner. The girls loved to slip into the back of his quarterly meetings and sit with straight spines as if their posture could keep the plane of the company level in turbulence. He typed back, "I'll try." "Tell them, proud already." Then he returned to the table where white papers and black coffee had formed a truce. Up in the sky, where distance distills truth, Linda Carver mistook her access for authority. That is a common error in expensive rooms. She had learned the choreography of power without learning its purpose. For 10 years she had poured and smiled and apologized for turbulence and pretended not to hear the jokes that landed like elbows. In that performance, a private theorem had formed. I know who belongs. Tonight, the theorem demanded proof. She came back down the aisle with a supervisor, Annika Sorensen, whose posture said she had traded the comfort of pretending for the harder comfort of being correct. Annika took the boarding passes, scanned the codes, glanced at her tablet, and then at the girls, her face softened by a degree you could miss if you were not looking. "Tickets are valid," Annika said evenly. "Full fare, cleared." Linda shaped her mouth into something that wanted to look like relief and landed closer to resentment. "Due diligence," she said, and the words sounded like a door clicking shut. Annika bent to the girl's eye level. "If you need anything, ring for me. I'm Annika." "Thank you," Arya said. Belle nodded. Noah did too, though her hands did not unclasp. The supervisor ushered Linda to the galley for a conversation that carried like static. Rowan Hale, a tech journalist with a neat beard and a camera-steady hand, tucked his phone against a hardcover and hit record. He caught fragments in the air. Tone matters in first. Optics, not policy. I know who belongs up here. That last phrase rang like a wrong note in a room full of perfect pitch. Rowan lifted the phone another half-inch. His beaten reporter's instinct recognized the blueprint of a story. A frontline employee absorbing years of class theater and exhaling it onto children. A company on a razor's edge. A sky with more witnesses than walls. Linda returned armored in a smile that had forgotten how to bend. "Sparkling water for the little ladies?" she asked in a tone that called the girls both small and decorative. Ears in row 2 counted the condescension. There were only Arya, Belle, and Noah. 3 points on a triangle designed to keep balance when the deck tilted. "We prefer our names," Noah said softly, surprising herself with the sound of her own voice. Linda's smile cracked. Adorable. "Which is which?" "You will learn," Belle said, and the sentence was not a dare. It was an itinerary. The plane nosed east into a strip of dusk along the wing like a purple sash. A bell chimed, seatbelts locked with polite clicks. A child in premium economy pressed an eye to the curtain seam and blinked into a brighter world. There is a way the air changes before a storm. The cabin had that feel now, a pressure you only notice when it finally breaks. Turbulence tapped the fuselage like a fingernail on a table. The captain's voice, all calm vowels, asked for belts. The aisle lights glowed the color of old tea. Linda steadied herself with one palm on Arya's headrest, leaned until her shadow crossed all 3 girls, and spoke low enough to be cruel and loud enough to be heard. "When we land," she said, "I'll make sure you're escorted to the correct section. Coach has room." A small sound, almost a laugh, came from somewhere behind the triplets. It died immediately, the way decency sometimes kills a joke. Annika's shoes, soft-soled, certain, were already moving. She had heard enough of everything. "Ms. Carver," Annika said, voice like a gavel wrapped in velvet. "Forward station. Now." "I'm serving," Linda replied without turning her head. "You're done serving this cabin." Linda glanced at the ring of faces, then back at the girls. Her eyes hardened the way ice does before it cracks. She wanted the last word and took it like a coin not hers to spend. "Figures," she said, "always pushing where you don't fit." In 12 syllables, she wrote her own report. Rowan's phone captured the sentence cleanly, the way a microscope captures a specimen. With detail, without mercy. He typed a note he did not publish yet. "Power believes it is invisible until a lens teaches it otherwise." The plane steadied. A hush settled like dust. Arya's hands released the armrests. She hadn't realized she was holding the plane up with her fingers. Belle's chin lowered a degree, not in surrender, but as if to look under the rude thing for the mechanism that made it tick. Noah breathed in for 4 and out for 8, the way Sanaa taught her for headaches and cruelty. The intercom clicked. The captain again. "Ladies and gentlemen, the chop should ease shortly." His syllables had the careful shape of a man who had learned that words can be either kerosene or water. Annika knelt. "Are you okay?" "We will be," Arya said. "Do you want to file now or when we land? I can escort you." Belle glanced at the constellation of small black cameras, that had quietly risen in polite hands. "I think the filing has already begun." Annika almost smiled. "I'll be back." Rowan added context to his notes. "Meridian Air, Public, Takeover Rumors, CEO, Marcus Reed." He found a press letter on the Wi-Fi that used the phrase, "dignity aloft." He saved a copy and felt the gravity of irony. At row 1A, Janet Park adjusted her scarf. She had sat on more than one airline advisory panel and understood that reputations are built in public and tested in private. She still couldn't see the girls clearly. She could see the shape of a moment that would matter. At row 3C, a college kid with a cracked phone case texted a group chat. "This is going to be on the news." His friend replied with a gif of popcorn. "Because the internet is an idiot until a better part of it remembers to grow up." 20 minutes into a 2-hour flight, a lesson older than aviation resurfaced. Altitude changes pressure, but not character. Some truths arrive like dawn, slowly, and then all at once. The intercom crackled again. Not the captain this time. A voice that many had heard during quarterly calls and never in a cabin. Even the sleepers sat up as if a hand had gently touched each shoulder. "This is Marcus Reed, CEO of Meridian Air." Sound traveled differently after that sentence. It did not bounce. It carried. "I have been informed that 3 passengers, 12 years old, have been questioned and mistreated in a way that does not reflect who we are or who we are working to become. Those passengers are my daughters, Aria, Belle, and Noah Reed." Silence expanded into every pocket of air. Even the engine hum felt further away. "My daughters travel under their mother's maiden name for privacy," Marcus continued, voice steady as a level. "But no child, under any name, should have to audition for dignity. To the passengers who witnessed this, I apologize. To my daughters, I am proud of you already." A breath moved through the rows like a small wind. "Effective immediately," he said. "The crew member who initiated this conduct is relieved of duty pending termination and review." Annika closed her eyes, then opened them. She did not look triumphant. She looked like a person who had just watched a bone set back into place. "Captain," Marcus added. "Yes, Mr. Reed." "Log the incident. Secure statements from crew and any passengers willing to provide them. I will meet this flight on arrival." "Yes, sir." The intercom clicked. The girls could hear their own breathing. "Aria?" Belle whispered. "Mm-hmm." "What do we do now?" Aria rose. Her straight, silky black hair, identical to her sister's, caught the warm cabin glow. She turned so that Linda could see her face, and so that someone's phone could see, too. "Not for theater. For record, we sit," Aria said. "We land. We tell the truth." Linda stood opposite, the color draining from her cheeks. The teal of her uniform looked suddenly like a costume she had borrowed and would be asked to return. A man in row 2C lowered his phone. The grandmother by the window whispered, "Thank God." The child at the curtain seam widened his eyes to the size of planets. Down on the ground, Sana, somewhere in a hospital corridor beneath fluorescence that knew no mercy, would later listen to the recording in a staff room and feel anger rise to the top of her chest like a tide, and then fall, replaced by pride so sharp it hurt to breathe. In the moment itself, the phone in her coat pocket buzzed once with a short message from Marcus. "We're good. Girls are Steele and Grace." She replied with a single word. "Always." Altitude, it turns out, is the perfect place to make a promise. There is nowhere to hide from it. They landed to rain that washed the runway clean enough to be a new page. The jet bridge kissed the door with a soft metallic sound. When the captain stepped out, he removed his cap in front of the girls. "I am sorry," he said, and his voice made room for the sentence. "I will not let this be forgotten." "Don't let it be repeated," Noah answered. and he nodded like a student thankful for a teacher. Marcus waited at the gate with no press officer at his elbow and no lawyer leaning toward his ear. He had brought a father's face and a CEO's spine. He gathered the girls and then reached for Sana, who had run through hospital corridors to be here, still in her white coat. "To everyone who recorded," Marcus said to the small knot of witnesses who had lingered awkwardly by the windows, "thank you. The truth remembers better when it is written down." A reporter near the rope lifted his chin. "Mr. Reed, what about the takeover optics?" "If the price of keeping my job is teaching my children that business wins matter more than their dignity," Marcus said, "I'll pick another line of work." Somewhere, investors composed emails. Somewhere else, a baggage handler watched the clip between shifts and felt something straighten in his back. Online, the noisy part of the internet made jokes because that is what it does first. Then other parts pushed back, and a conversation began to learn how to stand. HR escorted Linda Carver down a side corridor. No cuffs, just consequences, and the slow math of regret. She signed papers with a hand that shook enough to ruin the penmanship. Later, in a small apartment where the light hit the wall at 4 p.m. like a habit, she would enroll in a night course titled Bias, Power, and Work. She would sit in the back for 3 weeks, and then stand on the 4th to say, "I knew better. I used my access like a ladder to kick at children." That is not redemption. It is a beginning that some people never choose. Meridian Air did not simply print a statement and call it change. The company did what organizations write in bullet points and hate to schedule. They paid frontline staff to help redesign training. They put social workers in the room to catch the tears that come when unlearning begins. They tied promotions to peer testimony about how a person handles power when no one is applauding. They started a scholarship for kids who wanted to fly planes and fix them and lead companies but who had only ever been in waiting lines. The stock dipped for a day as people tested whether a conscience was a liability. Then it recovered because customers did the math. The airline that understands dignity understands risk, and risk is what keeps planes in the air. Some shareholders sold, sniffing softness. Others bought, gambling on the radical idea that a company is a promise with wings. The girls returned to school. They did not do interviews. They did not audition for virality. They wanted different kinds of fame. Aria joined debate and learned how to use precision without cruelty. Belle built a small app for mapping accessible bathrooms in airports and donated the code to an open-source project. Because the gate matters as much as the sky. Noah began flying lessons with a retired pilot who called her captain on day 1 and meant it every time after. They disagreed about what to call that night. Aria called it the test. Belle called it the reveal. Noah called it altitude. Sanaa called it practice for power. Marcus called it the night we told the sky. Our names. The name stuck because the sky had been listening. Letters arrived, paper, ink, and postage that left faint rings on kitchen tables. A woman from Ohio sent a photograph of herself at 12, holding a sign from a march her mother had taken her to. A man from Nairobi mailed a postcard of planes lined like silver fish and wrote that he worked nights on engines and that dignity is torku, not paint. A grandmother from Busan folded a paper crane and wrote that she had never flown first class, but was proud of the girls as if they were her own. On a Sunday morning, months later, the Reeds drove to a hill where you could watch inbound jets draw white lines across the city. They brought a thermos of cocoa and cinnamon rolls in a paper bag, going soft with warmth. They sat on a blanket that had learned parades and parks, and the grass-stained language of both. "Watch," Sanaa said, as a silver seed appeared at the edge of the sky. They watched. Another plane. Another. The air wrote and erased and wrote again. "What did you learn?" Marcus asked without looking away from the sky. Aria. "That truth is timing as much as content." Belle. that a camera is a witness, and sometimes a mirror. Noah. That silence is not surrender when it makes room for the right words. Marcus nodded, like a man taught by his children. That is a proper posture. The sun climbed. The city yawned itself awake. A plane banked and flashed belly sun the way certain fish do when they break the surface. The girls stood. 3 shadows stretched long on the grass. They walked back to the car, laughing about a small thing that would never matter to anyone else and would matter to them forever. Above them, the sky kept practicing its handwriting, white on blue, as if rehearsing the oldest line in the book. Dignity doesn't descend. It is carried, again and again, to altitude.